Sarah Winnemucca's autobiography, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims, chronicles not only her life, but the story of her people, the Paiutes, as they have their first interaction with white settlers. The Paiutes were mistreated by the settlers they interacted with, and this book was written to try and gather support for the Paiutes from the general population. In class, we spent most of our time discussing how Winnemucca was able to be successful because of her liminal position between white and native cultures and act as an interface between them. However, Winnemucca also had success because of her liminal position between gender roles. Winnemucca readily filled gender roles assigned to both genders and because of this was successful. Multiple times throughout her life, Sarah was hired as a teacher or an assistant in teaching Paiute children to read, write, and speak English. Typically, the role of a school teacher was one for women in this time period. The only teachers we meet in the novel, besides Sarah, are the wives of reservation agents. Late in the novel, Sarah comments that the children learned quickly because they knew what they were learning. The children know that learning English will be incredibly useful because they have seen white culture around them for their entire lives. Sarah Winnemucca is living proof to these children that in order to successfully work with white people, you need to speak English. Sarah is one of the few people in her tribe who can speak both English and native languages, and because of this is one of the few people who can vouch for the tribe. When talking about Sarah's impact on the Paiutes' preservation of their own culture and resistance of imperialism, Mauricio notes that even though Sarah pushes for the Paiutes to learn English, it is not in a way of accepting settlers, but rather it is required in order to interact with them, which is unavoidable. Here, Sarah is taking a much more masculine role, akin to something of chief, by guiding the education of the children in her tribe. Mauricio goes on to explain that Winnemucca is not only telling the Paiutes to learn English, but is also talking to the white settlers that they should too learn the native languages so that the two cultures can have a mutual understanding and interact more successfully with each other. Whether the job she is faced with is teaching or guiding the education of the next generation, Sarah does not hesitate to take up the job. While teaching English, Sarah is able to earn a wage in a more feminine position where she can directly use that money to help her people. And while advocating for education, she takes on the more masculine role of a leader, which will have implications on her tribe for years to come. During her first interactions with the military as an adult, Sarah takes advantage of her femininity. When her brother is making arrangements for her to stay with the military while he goes to look for their father, he makes sure that no soldier talks to his sister. Because she is a woman, Winnemucca is seen as far more vulnerable than her male counterparts. This vulnerability ends up working in Winnemucca's favor. Because she is not seen as a threat, Winnemucca is able to quickly build a strong relationship with the military, working as a translator. Here, Winnemucca gains the trust of the military officers, and this good relation helps her and the Paiutes many times in her future. When Sarah, at the end of the novel, has nowhere else to turn, she goes back to the military for employment as a translator again. Even though Sarah initiated her connection to the military from a very feminine place, she took on a much more masculine role during the Bannock War. During the war, Sarah was still serving as a translator, but her work spanned much more than just communicating. She also acted as a scout, as she was very familiar with the terrain, and a spy for the white military and the Native American tribes with whom they were allied. Because of all the work Sarah did for the military, both during and after the war, soldiers and the officers trusted her. At one specific instance, when they come to a choice in path, Sarah tells the highest-ranking officer to decide which way to go. In response, he says, "Now, Sarah, you know this country better than we do, and you know what to do. We are at your command." This is the most explicit display of trust that the officers showed to Sarah. Had they had any suspicion of her motives, they would not have allowed her to make this decision. The word command is a key one. It is not just that the men think highly of Sarah, it is that they know she will make the best decision, and they trust that she will. After hearing this response, Sarah quickly takes the lead and does not hesitate to finish the operation that they had begun. The biggest thing Sarah did for her people was lecture and go to Washington to appeal the pleas of the Paiutes to the President and Secretary of the Interior. Even though she did travel with her brother and the chief, her father, Sarah had to do a lot of work in the form of translating because she spoke and understood English the best. Thanks to all of her past experience with the military, Sarah was successfully able to communicate with the President and receive word that the Paiute people would be reunited. Snyder notes in her analysis of what Sarah did for the Paiutes during lectures that Winnemucca performs masculinity in the role of a warrior chieftain and translator. Snyder compares Winnemucca's rhetoric in the presentation to that of a chief. While she is obviously not the chief of the Paiutes, her work as an orator is not something a female, either from white or native society, would typically do. While translating for her father, as he, the chief, asked for the president and secretary to help with their cause, Sarah was filling a much more feminine, submissive role, because all she did was repeat what others said. Yet, while on the same trip, Sarah quickly flipped roles and took on a much more masculine job of taking the stage and giving a presentation about her people to the general public. Sarah did not hesitate to change roles when she saw it necessary. Looking back, it is clear that Sarah was able to fill a number of different roles even when they were assigned to different genders. Being a woman, she was able to quickly gain the trust of the military when she began her work as a translator, and she was able to quickly fall into the roles of a school teacher when that was what she needed to do the most. However, Sarah was not limited by her gender in the role she took. When war came and the U.S. military needed her help and expertise, she took the job without hesitation because she knew it would help the Paiutes. When her people needed her to be their voice in Washington and on the West Coast, she went out, talked to the president, and lectured on her own, a daunting task for anyone. In the end, Sarah Winnemucca was successful because of her ability to adapt to and respond appropriately to situations. In times where she could lead, like in war, she stood strong and took control. And when times were more sensitive and she was asking for help, she was not overly aggressive. Even though Native American culture was different than that of upper white society, and the ideals of the cult of true womanhood were not something that Sarah was ever expected to face, she still went above and beyond. Not only was expected of her, but was expected of any member of Paiute society in that time period. Even her father knew that she was a leader and stated that she had done more for the Paiutes than most chiefs in their history. Sarah did not fall into the role set for her by Native American culture or even by the white settlers she met. Sarah was able and willing to fill whatever job was required, regardless of the gender role typically assigned to it, in order to help the Paiutes.